Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining today. We're going to start with a few opening prayers. And before we do, just take a moment to connect with your compassionate intention. Why are you here today listening to this class? We are here so that we can learn how to be more present and compassionate for the benefit of all beings, developing our heart and our mind, our compassion and our wisdom for the benefit of all. So just take a moment and reflect on that. All right, so we're going to start with a few opening prayers. There's a link right below the video to the opening prayers document. You can follow along. We'll say these in Tibetan, but if you're more comfortable reading them in English, that's perfectly fine. We'll chant the first one 3 times, and then the following ones we'll chant 1 time each. Om. Organ yogi num jansam pemage sardompola yatsen chogi ngorupe pemajung ne jesura Kordu kandro mangpokor ketki jesuda druki jinji lobchi shek suso guru pelma city home Organ yogi num jansam pemage sardompola yatsen chogi ngorupe pemajung ne jesura Kordu kandro mangpokor ketki jesuda druki jinji lobchi shek suso guru pelma city home Organ yogi num jansam pemage sardompola yatsen chogi ngorupe pemajung ne jesura Kordu kandro mangpokor ketki jesuda druki jinji lobchi shek suso guru pelma city home And these we'll do 1 time each. Kunzando sem garab shiri sing pema karaji pani shunga soso nemna taten katsa so kate lama namla wadem. Ogmen chuki yinki pojana dusum sange kongi ngomone rangsem choku ngontum tomsepe tawe lama namla wadem. Sashi pochu chu ching me to cham mi ram ning shin ye te kempadi sange zing du mikte po wai joku nam da jing la cho pai shok tram guru rat nam mandala putta mega samudra saparana samaye ahom Samchen namki sampadang lo yi jeja chitabar jeton tomon tepai choki kolo kordu so. All right, so today we're going to get started with a brief meditation. This is a brief breath meditation. And what we're going to do is we're going to just sit comfortably with your back straight in a cross-legged position. If you're in a chair, that's okay too. But in order to stabilize the mind, it is important that we sit still. So find a comfortable seat where you're not going to be shifting around a lot. You can put a cushion under your butt or whatever you need to get your back in the right posture. You want to make sure that your back is straight. So you're not slouching, and you're also not trying to be really sway backed and uncomfortable. So just sit however you need to have a straight back, and to be comfortable and relaxed. So we're going to do this brief breath meditation to settle our minds. And this will help us as we listen in this class so that we can absorb the information that we're hearing and actually take it in and not just have it run off of us like water off a duck's back. You know, you want to actually absorb the information that you're hearing. So we're going to do this breath meditation to calm our minds. Meditation is the natural state of mind when it's relaxed, stable, and open. And when our mind is in that state, when it's calm and settled, there's a spaciousness that allows time between action and reaction. Without that space, we're more like animals who don't think before they act. They just are reacting to their environment. You know, something's chasing me. Oh, here's food. Let me eat it. Just grabbing at things, running from things, reacting. And that's actually our normal state of being. We're normally not really any more enlightened than our cats. Like, we're basically just chasing things and not actually employing higher thought. So with our minds in this state where they're rarely calm and settled, they're running wild like monkeys, and you know, our minds are just agitated and wound up and out of control. And when our minds are in that state, they control us. The mind controls us, not the other way around. We're not in charge of our minds at all. We're just letting it run wild. So the point of meditation is to create space in your mind. When we have space, we're not running around like, we're not like wild monkeys. We're not running around like stupid animals, not knowing why we're reacting to anything the way that we're reacting to it, not even aware of our own reactions. When we have space in our minds, we are able to balance our emotions better. And we're better able to actually determine what thoughts are helpful and what are harmful, and what we should actually be, what we should be adopting and what we should be discarding. We're a lot more able to actually use our discernment when we have space in our thoughts. So the mind is like a muscle. In the same way that you can work out to keep your body strong, the mind needs to be trained to be calm and relaxed, yet also alert and wakeful. So not training our minds to be sleepy, just relaxed, but also awake. So if we want to generate the awakened mind of wisdom and compassion, we first have to calm our minds. We're not going to be able to really stabilize a mind of wisdom and compassion if we're distracted by this, that, and the other thing constantly. So we first have to tame some of that habit of distraction, of the wild running around. And then when our mind is more stable, then we're actually able to engage in deeper practice. So this is really a foundational practice that will benefit you whether you wind up doing visualization practices or any other spiritual practices. And it also helps to stabilize your mind so that in your day-to-day life, you don't just react to things with anger or greed. You have a little bit more space so that you're not so much at the whim of your disturbing emotions. So we're going to sit comfortably with a straight back in your comfortable position, and just place your hands in your lap. You can place them on your knees, or you can, traditionally you'd place the right hand and the left hand with the thumbs touching, and place that so your thumbs are just below your navel. You can sit like that. This position helps to open the shoulders, open the rib cage, and it kind of helps to facilitate a good posture. But you can also have your hands in your lap if that's more comfortable. So in our meditation, we are going to have our eyes slightly open. We're not trying to block out the world, and we're not trying to block out our thoughts. So we are actually going to be We're going to leave our eyes open, just gently gazing downwards. You can kind of follow the line of your nose. Gently follow that down. And just rest your eyes someplace in front of you. It isn't too distracting. We're going to leave our ears open. If there are sounds in our environment, that's okay. And if there's thoughts in our head, that is perfectly okay and expected. We're not trying to block our thoughts. We are just going to keep our minds focused on our breath, and whatever comes up in our environment, whether it's thoughts in our mental environment or sounds or sights in our physical environment, we're not going to block them out, but we're not going to be distracted by them either. They're allowed to be, and we're going to keep our focus on our breath. So just allow yourself to breathe normally. You might want to start with a deep breath to just relax a bit. And then allow your breath to just regain its natural rhythm. Don't try to control your breath at all. Just breathe naturally. And put the most gossamer thin attention on your breath. Your attention is like a feather, gently riding on the surface of your breath. It's like taking a pulse. You don't put any pressure on it. You don't try to change it or control it. Just observe it, just like taking your pulse. Just keep your mind gently on your breath. When you find yourself following a thought, just drop it. Just drop it and come back. When you're distracted by a sound, just drop it and come back to your breath. Come back to that breath. You don't have to look to see what's distracting you. You don't have to examine your thoughts in order to drop them. As soon as you notice that you've been distracted from your breath, drop whatever you're doing and return to your breath. Your meditation is not lost by hearing your thoughts, but by following them down the road. So just let your thoughts pop like bubbles on the surface of a pond. Don't even look to see what they are. Just bring your attention back to that gossamer thin attention on your breath. We'll go for 5 minutes. So, today I wanted to talk about misinformation. We are living in an age of fake news. And I think we all know that. But I wanted to talk about it a little bit because I recently watched the documentary, The Social Dilemma, which was an incredible documentary. I think everyone should watch it. Because it's technically a film, not a documentary, because they do have a fictional narrative alongside the very real information. But this movie really, it really exposes just how much the internet, the information on the internet, and the algorithms of the internet influence the way that we think about our world and about ourselves. And it's frightening. It's really frightening. So I highly recommend watching this movie and contemplating for yourself the information that you are bringing into your head and bringing into your mind, and the information that you're absorbing. It's just incredible when you think about the vast amount of information that we're taking into ourselves now. I saw someone recently talking about how in this information age, we are actually asking ourselves to compute an inhumane amount of information in a given day. The amount of if you think about the amount of information that you take in a given day, just on the internet, on Facebook, on Instagram, on the news, at work, in your emails, whatever, the amount of information that you take in on a given day compared to the amount of information that someone would take into their head maybe in the 90s or in the 1900s or in, I don't know, the 9th century. Like, go way back. I mean, our brains have not, we still have very ancient brains. The way our brains are made up has not accelerated at the speed that our information technology has. And so we are now processing an insane amount of information on a daily basis. And just as we don't think much before we react to things, we don't have very much space in our minds. We kind of are just led around by our hatred and greed and ignorance, and our habits, just automatically grabbing at things we like and rejecting things we don't like, and responding with anger to things we don't understand. And the way that we put so little critical thought into our words, thinking before we speak or thinking before we act, or anything like that. We also don't think very much about the information that we take in and subscribe to. I think even those of us, like, I consider myself to be a critical thinker, and even I have my lazy moments when I take something in and I don't question it. And it's scary when you add up all of the moments that you have taken in information without questioning it. If you add up all of those moments, those moments of being completely just blindly swallowing something, what does that add up to? How many pieces of information do you have that you blindly swallowed? So, something to think about. I also took a quiz recently on the internet called "Can You Spot the Troll?" And this quiz took some normal accounts and some accounts that have been created by Russia's internet research agency to dupe Americans. And it took these different internet profiles, these social media profiles, and had you guess which one was the troll. And I only got 6 out of 8 correct, which scared me. One of them was a real person I thought was fake, but the other one, the fake that I thought was real, was the person whose beliefs most closely aligned with my own. And that's why it was so difficult to spot them, because I was their target, because I had the beliefs that they were trying to portray themselves as holding. Those are the same beliefs that I hold. And so it seemed, so they kind of got under my radar. I didn't see that they were a threat. So I think that exposes something about the way that we analyze information, which is that if information agrees with our our preconceived ideas. If we have an idea of the way the world works and you give me a piece of information that matches with that idea, I'm likely to believe it. If you give me information that is radically different from my understanding of the world, I'll question it. But it's very easy, breadcrumb by breadcrumb, to lead someone off of a path of truth and, off of the correct information by appealing to what they already hold to be true, to what they already believe to be real. And by aligning yourself with those ideals, you can very easily just add in a little nugget of misinformation, and they start tilting a little bit, start tilting off that path. So it's something to really be aware of and be vigilant of, is not only what is the information that you're consuming, but also, are you questioning it? And just are you being discerning in what you're taking in and what you're listening to and who you believe? Or are you blindly following anonymous accounts on the internet and thinking that they're real? So this is more important than ever, I think, because now with the internet, we have so many people out there doing deceptive work on the internet and spreading deceptive ideas and misinformation for a variety of reasons. You have everything from dangerous misinformation, like the president saying to inject disinfectant to kill coronavirus. That's incredibly dangerous information that people may believing that they can believe someone who's given a platform by the United States of America. There are also, conspiracies out in the world right now, like QAnon conspiracy theories. There's which have real world repercussions. If anyone remembers Pizzagate, someone actually believed conspiracy theories on the internet about a pedophile ring operating in the basement of a pizza shop, and a man actually showed up to this pizza shop with a loaded gun to break up a fake pedophile ring. So, this could have been a real tragedy. Many people could have died because of a false idea that preyed on this man's good intentions. This man believed that he was going to save children who were in danger, and someone had taken advantage of his good heart and his his protectiveness of little children. Those ideals were taken advantage of. So we have to be careful. Just because someone sounds like what they're saying is, if someone is saying something and it sounds like what you believe, just be careful with it. Be especially careful about whether or not you're critically thinking about that information, or whether you just want that information to be true. So there's also, spiritually speaking, the internet is also rife with misinformation about the Buddhist path. So I have often found on the internet, I'll go and look up something and find some article maybe on Medium, or on Huffington Post, or maybe on someone has a Buddhist blog up. These random internet blogs, and there'll be some post from someone talking about what the Buddha said, or talking about what the difference is between the different schools of Tibetan Buddhism, or any topic, really, any Buddhist topic, or how karma works. And you have to question who this person is that's writing this article. There have been many articles where I've gotten like a page or two in, it seems normal, and then I reach a point where it's like, that's an odd statement. That's an odd takeaway from this text. That's not the takeaway that I've seen legitimate, realized, recognized, enlightened masters take away from that text. Something seems a little off here. Who is the person that wrote this article? Well, you look a little deeper, and the person is kind of a no one, like, or they actually are maybe a made up person. They're an anonymous person or with a made up name, or they've never had anything published before. They've have no academic credentials, or their academic credentials seem iffy. And those kinds of articles are really dangerous because it's the same type of thing as the Russian internet agency thing. It's the first 2 pages of this article, it sounds like what you believe. It sounds good. It sounds like stuff you've read before. It sounds legitimate, and so you assume the author is legitimate. And then after 10 or so paragraphs, they start inserting their own perspective. That is actually counter to the Buddhist teaching. Maybe it's nihilistic, or it's eternalistic, or it negates, some aspect. It gives you a wrong idea of how karma works, or it is disparaging a legitimate teacher. And so you have to be very careful, because just because the first 10 paragraphs agree with what you believe, that doesn't mean that you should believe what this person says. You need to check out, who is this person? Who is this person that you are so quick to believe because they agree with you? There's a Jataka story, a Jataka tale. Jataka tales are tales of the Buddhist past lives, and there's a Jataka tale called The Crane and the Crab, and it's a story about, there was a pond of fish. I'll summarize this. It's not, if you can get the published kids version of this, it's quite good. So the story is, there's this small pond with a lot of fish in it, and there's a drought, and the pond is drying up. And so the fish are getting very desperate. They're very scared. They know that they're going to die because the pond that they're in is drying up. And there's a crane on the edge of the pond, and this crane just comes and eats the fish all the time. But today he decides, he's like, I can just go and hunt these fish like normal, but maybe there's an easier way. So this crane goes and stands in the middle of the pond and kind of assumes like a meditative spiritual countenance, and says, "Oh, you fish, I feel so horrible for you. Your lot is so sad. You're here in this pond and it's drying up, and what are you to do? I just weep thinking of your suffering. How awful this is." And the fish say, "Wow, a crane's never cared about us before. Who is this special crane that actually cares for our well-being? What an odd crane," completely forgetting that this is the crane that has eaten many of their brothers and sisters over the last few months. How can this crane be so kind-hearted to us? How wonderful. And so the crane tells them, there's this beautiful pond just right over that ridge, this beautiful pond. You should let me take you there and you'll be happy. It's much larger. The drought isn't affecting that pond. It's got plenty of water. You'll be fine. You should totally let me carry you over to this pond. And the little fish are like, "Well, we're going to die here. Maybe we should trust you. But we don't know if we can trust you. Like, you're a crane, you're a predator. How can we know that what you say is true? This sounds good, but how can we trust you?" So the crane says, "Pick one fish among you who you all really, really trust, whose word you trust deeply, and I will carry this fish over to the pond. I'll show them this beautiful, majestic, water, and bring them back to tell you. And then if you can trust this fish, then you can let him decide if this is a real story or not." So they go, "Okay." And this old fish says, "Hey, I'm going to die anyways. Like, I'm old. The pond's drying up. I'm going to die either way. So go ahead, carry me." And so the crane lifts up with this fish on his back, and carries the fish over the tree line. And he sees this beautiful, beautiful pond that's just glittering in the sunlight and just gorgeous. So the crane brings the fish back, and the fish tells all of his fish friends, like, "Yeah, the crane's telling the truth. There's actually a pond over there. It's beautiful. It's huge. And there's so much water. There's plenty of room for us." So the fish go, great, let's do it. Let's trust the crane. So the crane takes them one by one and carries them away. But the crane does not take them to the pond. One by one, the crane takes the fish over to the tree line and descends into the forest and drops them on the ground and eats them. One by one, he empties the pond of this fish, dropping them in the forest and eating them. And then as he comes back, by the time he's coming back for the last few fish, he's really very fat and kind of, staggering almost as he's landing, and, not able to fly gracefully at all because his belly's so full with all these fish. So after all the fish are gone, all that's left in the pond is a crab. And this crab, this crab is very cynical, and it's like, I don't know about this, crane. You look very fat. I don't think you've just been flying away with these fish and taking them, to this pond out of the goodness of your heart. I'm not buying that. Somehow you've gained 20 pounds in the last hour. So the crane is like, well, come on, just believe me. Just believe me. And the crane's all egotistical because he's just eaten 100 fish. And so the crane's like, the crane doesn't even need, he doesn't need any more food. He's already fat. But now his ego's involved, and he really wants to just, man, this crab could be delicious. What a great way to round off the day is just eat this crab too. So the crane really tries to convince the crab to come along, and the crane wants to hold the crab in his beak, of course, and the crab's like, I'm not having that. I'll go with you if you let me hold on to your neck, because I've got these great pincers and they'll hold on really tight. So I'll only go with you if you let me ride on your back and hold on to your neck. So the crane doesn't like this idea, but decides to go along with it. So he's already pretty inflated and feels like he's going to get away with this. So the crane flies off with the crab on his back and doesn't take him to the pond. Takes him to the pile of bones in the middle of the forest. And as he's descending, the crab says, is that all that's left of my friends? Is this pile of bones? And the crane goes, yes, and you'll be next. So just kindly get off my neck, and I'll be eating you for dessert. And the crab is like, no way are we doing that. So the crab closes its pincers and basically chops off the head of the crane. And the crane dies, and the crab just walks from there to the pond. So sad story. No one really has a happy ending in that story. But the point of it is that it's important to examine the motivations of those that tell us things. If someone tells you that they've got the answer to something, or they've got the way out, they've got the answer, they've got the real read on the situation, they really know what's going on, it's important to examine their motivations. For instance, this crane had no real motivation to help these fish. He definitely had motivation to eat the fish, though. And maybe if the fish had put a little bit more critical thought into it, they would have seen what the motivation of the crane was. The crab was able to see that. The crab was able to see that this crane did not have any reason to help the crab. And that even this crane in particular, this was kind of a change of tune. This isn't like this crane had just been a meditative, peaceful, vegan crane for all its life. This was a crane that had already been feasting in this pond, and all of a sudden decided to say that he was their savior. So if someone claims to be a savior, if someone tells you they know the truth, they've got the path, they are the one to listen to, their ways, their information is the real information, just take the time to investigate what their motivation is in telling you that, and what their motivation is for wanting you to believe them. So it's important to, along the lines of water. Water is going to be a theme today. So along the lines of these fish listening to this crane, and how can they know to trust the crane? Anytime that we are taking in information, it's important to question what the source of that information is. In the same way that if you were to drink from a stream, you should know what lies upstream. You're not going to drink from a stream that, just 10 feet away from a pipeline of toxic sludge being dumped into a river, right? You're not going to go and bring your cup down to the river where the toxic sludge is being dumped in, and that's not where you're going to drink from. You're going to want to drink from a mountain stream or like a pure spring, something where you are assured that there is no contaminants, that what you're getting is pure, clean water. So I personally have drinking from, I'm the kind of person that takes risks at time, and I've drinking from a stream a few times. I remember I grew up in Sedona, Arizona, and there's a stream that is a mountain stream that comes from Flagstaff. And at one place along the stream, there is a spring that has just the most amazing water. It just tastes so pure and wonderful, and it's amazing. And it's a spring. It's in the ground. It comes up quite clean. Now, from that same Oak Creek, if you're in the wrong spot, you might think that you could drink from the stream, not realizing that just around the bend, just upstream from you, is a tourist spot where people are throwing their dirty diapers into the river, into the creek. So you don't want to be drinking downstream from dirty diapers in the water. So that was just always something that we took into consideration when swimming, picking a swimming hole or picking somewhere where you might, we're swimming here, is it safe to drink the water? How far am I from a tourist spot? What's upstream from me? That's always a question that you want to ask. What's upstream from me? Is this water safe to drink? So when we consume information, a lot of times we think that we are analyzing information more than we are. And we think that we're determining the credibility of our sources, but we're not actually putting much critical thought into it. It's amazing how much on the internet I see people say, do your research, don't be a sheeple, don't just follow the crowd, just do your research, do your research. And a lot of the people that I see saying do your research don't actually know how to do research, and they don't actually know how to authenticate a source of information, how to authenticate a teacher, how to determine if someone's academic credibility is in good standing or not, just anything. Just, I found it written somewhere, and so I did my research. That doesn't qualify as research. And often we want to believe the people that we know. We think that the people who we know, and we trust them, and so we may by extension trust their ability to tell what's credible or not, but without actually having examined whether they're good at telling what a credible source is. We trust them not to lie to us, and so we take what they say as being truth, but we haven't actually analyzed whether they're any good at telling lies from the truth themselves. For instance, there was, I think that this was like I don't know, sometime last year, there was some rumor that went around. It went around the internet. It went around by text messages too. And it was this thing that was, it was saying, it was when the coronavirus pandemic started. It was in, I think, March. And there was a rumor going around that you weren't going to be allowed to cross state lines anymore. And where I'm living in the Maryland, DC, Virginia area, people cross state lines to go grocery shopping. Like every little thing, you're always crossing a state line. There's a river that goes right between everyone's commutes. So, so you're always driving to DC or driving to Maryland or driving to Virginia to go to the doctor, go to visit your mom, whatever. So the idea of borders closing, of not being able to cross state lines, put a lot of people, on edge, made them nervous of like, oh no, when is this going to happen? And it was this rumor. The messages going around was, my friend Linda, who I know and trust, works in the government and talked to someone, and she said this is going to happen tonight. I remember getting this from someone, and I was like, really? I don't think this is true. And but the person who I heard it from was like, no, I trust my friend. And this is their friend Linda who said this. And so if their friend Linda said this, I trust them. But guess what? This person who passed on the message, they didn't know Linda. It was their friend who said, my friend Linda. And that person didn't know Linda either. It was their friend who said, my friend Linda. And on and on and on. This text message is going around. My friend Linda says state lines are going to close at 6 o'clock tonight. And it cited some law that, the government's pulling this law, and they're going to shut down the state lines. So I Googled what the law said, and the law had absolutely nothing to do with closing state borders. And it was just a random defense of this preposterous idea they're going to close state borders. But people believed this because they believed their friend, and they believed that if their friend is trustworthy, then their friend Linda must also be trustworthy. So it's careful, you have to be careful. Ask your friend, is this actually a friend of yours? Is this oh, your mom sent it to you. Is this actually a friend of your mom's, or did your mom get this from a friend? Whose friend Linda is this? Do you know Linda's last name? What town does Linda live in? Do you know her? If you don't know her, how do you know this is real? How many people has this passed through before it got to you? You have no idea. You have no idea if this is even what Linda said. Linda's message could have been completely changed through this game of telephone by the time it got to you. We're always playing telephone. I've seen so many things on the internet go this way too. On Facebook, people copy and paste these things. They copy and paste from a friend and a statement. And then sometimes you'll see these go around. There's one going around right now that I've seen at least 10 different versions of, attributed to different, like a poem. And it's like attributed to different authors each time. It has a different context. It's in one post, it's related to Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing. On another post, it's related to Obama's inauguration. And another post, it's related to some other event in history. And it's attributed to different authors every time. Who knows what's real? It's just copy and pasted, so you can't even follow the source. You can't even look to see who originally posted it. And sometimes we're misinformed, not because someone's trying to pull the wool over our eyes, but because they don't know better themselves. That happens all the time. When I was in school, I was raised in Arizona. At the time I was there, we were 48th in the nation for education. So I walked away with a lot of questionable ideas in my head. My sixth grade teacher was, my sixth grade geography teacher was adamant that Washington, D.C. was not the capital of America. She said that Washington was the capital and that D.C. was a neighborhood in Washington. For anyone that lives in Washington, D.C., this is ridiculous. Being all the way across the country in Arizona, it was very difficult to prove to her that this was not true. The same teacher also told me that thunder happens when clouds bump into each other in the sky. During a science class, she said thunder happens because clouds bump into each other in the sky. That's what makes the noise. So if that was my extent of if that was the extent of the knowledge that I had graduating school, the knowledge I have about weather and climate and how things work, boy, how would I interpret news articles about climate change? How would that affect my worldview? Something so small, this one sentence comment that a teacher made in sixth grade, could completely prevent me from understanding the actual current events of this time and a situation that is threatening humanity. Climate change is happening, and how do we know it's real? Because all of the experts say it's real. And this little misinformation that I got in school could totally warp my ability to understand that. So it's very important that we have discernment, even with just small little facts. Small little facts that we take in can massively change our interpretation of facts that we accrue down the road. Even if we're well-read, let's say some people might be saying, well, I don't get all my information off the internet. I read books. Good for you. You read books. Books require scrutiny too. There's Amazon's having issues right now. People plagiarizing books, putting out fake books. They will print off a copy of a book and change paragraphs and things and put it out. There's all sorts of fake publications going. You think, oh, this is a copy of Frankenstein and it's a good deal. Well, turns out it's not the actual Frankenstein. It's someone's plagiarized and badly copy edited version of Frankenstein. So, you have to be very careful. There's also, I was amazed. I've been reading this book called Lies My Teacher Told Me. And it talks about where our school textbooks come from. And this is an important thing to consider because we go through 12 years of schooling in this country with school textbooks. They're published by only a handful of textbook publishing houses. But one of the things that this author points out is that he says, since every bad paragraph had to have an author, surely authors lie at the heart of the process. It's not always clear who the real authors are, however. The names on the cover of a textbook are rarely those of the people who really wrote it. And he goes and he investigates all of the major textbooks being used in public schools, and he finds that the authors who are listed on the front of the textbooks usually have very little knowledge of what information is in the textbooks that they supposedly wrote. And that there are teams of copy editors who are not experts on the subjects in these textbooks, who are given a little bit of information and then asked to write whole new paragraphs or sections or come up with all of the exercises in the textbooks, all the little questions that go in the margins. And especially all of the information about more recent events is usually not written by the authors listed on the textbook covers, but by an anonymous author who you'll never find the name of. So you don't know. And there are all sorts of egregious errors then that are printed in textbooks because of this practice, such as textbooks saying that President Truman easily settled the Korean War by dropping the atomic bomb, which would come as a surprise to Dwight Eisenhower, who campaigned for the presidency in 1952 with the slogan, "I will go to Korea." So it's, even when we have an institution, our elementary schools or our high schools, we have this institution we want to believe will do right by us, and yet they may not know the authors of the books that they are telling us to read, and the publishers of the books may not release the names of the authors that they're telling us to read, and the authors of those books may not know even. So this world is filled with misinformation, so we have to have an incredible amount of discernment in order to navigate it. Even when we, one of the dangers, I think, specifically with Buddhism, is the danger of academia and falling for academic credentials as in place of wisdom, thinking that academic credentials are equal to the wisdom of lived experience and of actual enlightened wisdom. There is sometimes someone can be very well read and may tell you things that are, generally the facts maybe are correct, but the angle or the spin with which they tell them can completely warp the way that it's interpreted. It's very easy to do this, even with just subtle things. It's very easy for someone to warp the meaning. And this is very dangerous when it comes to a spiritual path. One of the things that really gets my goat the most is Buddhology. So Buddhology is an angle that I often see employed when discussing Buddhism in academia. I see this often when I go to museums. Museum exhibits about Buddhism tend to fall into Buddhology. And we've had Buddhologists visit the temple. And if you've never heard of a Buddhologist, I would say my best description of them is that they are a sociologist who comes and visits a temple and observes people interacting with their faith as one would observe baboons in a cage. And and then writes about it as an expert. So I want you to be aware of this too, because I think this is something that is very common on the internet, very common in just the academic treatment of minority religions in general. And so I think you should be aware of this when you see it, just to have your ear tuned to this. So I just want to read an excerpt. This is an excerpt from Lies My Teacher Told Me, because it's a great example of how this has been applied to other religions. It doesn't apply this directly to Buddhism, but it's the same tone. So for instance, Native American religions are often talked about in textbook in a way such as this. These Native Americans in the Southeast believed that nature was filled with spirits. Each form of life, such as plants and animals, had a spirit. Earth and air held spirits too. People were never alone. They shared their lives with the spirits of nature. So this textbook's trying to show respect for the Native American religion, but it doesn't work because the way that they've phrased it, phrasing this in this flat academic way, makes it seem make-believe, not like a sophisticated theology. And if you were to frame this, like if you were to talk about Christianity in this way, for instance, I think you can very easily hear what this tone of voice sounds like. Let's try a similarly succinct summary of the beliefs of many Christians. You could say, these Americans believed that one great male God ruled the world. Sometimes they divided him into 3 parts, which they called Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. They ate crackers and wine or grape juice, believing that they were eating the Son's body and drinking his blood. If they believed strongly enough, they would live on forever after they died. So, I mean, I would say that's downright rude to portray a religion in that way. So just be careful. Because Buddhism is a minority religion in this country, many of the writings about Buddhism are written in that type of voice, in a way that makes it sound really just superstitious and ridiculous, and like there are no and like it's not a living tradition, like it's something that people used to believe back when they were stupid in the 8th century. So just like be aware when you hear that tone of voice, be aware of these kind of subtle angles that people have. You know, you can say, well, it's true. People do drink wine and crackers in church. Yeah, but the way that was phrased, is not the truth. That angle is not the truth of the Christian path. And when people use that tone to describe the Buddhist path, it's not the truth either. You know, like beliefs in reincarnation can be very easily simplified and written in a way that sounds stupid and superstitious. So just be careful of small shifts in tone and angle that can change your perception of the information that is being presented. So this is why, with so much information available to us on the internet right now, there's so many Dharma talks, so many books, so many Dharma articles, Dharma websites, there's publishing houses now, there's magazines now. It's really wonderful that there's all of these resources to interact with the Dharma, especially if you're living somewhere where you know, maybe you don't have a center nearby you, and so you're getting online and you're lucky that you can find all of these wonderful YouTube videos, and all of these wonderful books are available to order, and that's really wonderful on one way, because there are people who otherwise would not have access to these teachings that now do because of the internet. But at the same time, information alone is not a path. If you think about the pitfalls of ordinary misinformation and the harm that can cause, such as, you know, making someone show up to a pizza shop with a loaded gun, when we are searching for a path that will allow us to put this life to good use, to find the end of suffering and attain complete liberation for the benefit of all beings, the stakes are very high. If we find the right teacher, they can help us reach our goal. But if we subscribe to the wrong teacher, we may squander the opportunity of this life on nonsense that takes us nowhere. Or even worse, we can squander this life wasting our time, turning our mind in a direction that will lead us to rebirth in the animal realms or the hell realms where we'll have no opportunity to practice. Dzongtse Jamyang Khyentse Rinpoche says, to follow the teachings of the Buddha fully and completely, you must first be accepted as a student by a spiritual master, a guru. He will then give you very specific advice about what you need to do on your path to enlightenment and when you need to do it. And by doing so, will save you a great deal of time and effort. I know there are many people who think that they are knowledgeable enough to make sense of all of the books that are out there and the information that's out there and forge your own path and all of that. And they really believe that that they can just do it on their own, and that they can just read a million books and just meditate a lot and they'll be fine. But His Holiness Panna Rinpoche also cautions us that a teacher is necessary. His Holiness Panna Rinpoche says, if enlightenment could be attained without reliance on a master, the Buddhas and lineage masters of the past would have said so. But they all attained enlightenment by relying on their master and practicing his or her instructions. One may be a great scholar and memorize as many texts as an elephant can carry on its back, but one still won't attain enlightenment without the blessings of a master. It is through the blessings of one's guru that one can recognize the nature of one's mind. I'm not just making this up. That's how all the masters explained things. I love His Holiness Panna Rinpoche's practicality there. If you could do this without a teacher, the teachers would have said so. It's very practical. So really we need a teacher to make sense of all of the information that's out there. We're not knowledgeable enough yet to be able to parse out what's true and what's not. So we need a teacher who is authentic. And how do we know if a teacher is authentic? How do we know who to trust? Dzongtse Jamyang Khyentse says, those wishing to follow the Buddhist path to enlightenment should rely on what are called in the teachings the four authentics. These are the authentic words of the Buddha, the Buddhist teachings, the authentic clarification of the teachings that can be found in the Shastras or commentaries, which were written by great masters of the past, the further clarification that is the result of authentic personal experience, and for this experience to find expression, an authentic guru. And Dzongtse Jamyang Khyentse says, in practice, this means that an authentic Buddhist master will share his authentic personal experience of the teachings and practice that has been clarified by relevant descriptions and authentic shastras and accurately represent the authentic words of the Buddha. And as an authentic guru is the pivotal element in this process, it is essential that students have absolute confidence in and devotion for their guru. So one of the things that we can learn from this, just from that quote alone, is that if we find a guru who does not have a guru, they're not a real guru. Because all of the lineage masters and all of the teachers of the past have said that one must rely on a teacher in order to pursue this path. One must rely on a teacher in order to ensure that you're practicing authentic path. So if there's some guru who's too good to have a guru of his own, that person is making things up. So we know that we can know that a guru is authentic by looking at who their guru is, and who their guru is, and who their guru is, and you can just kind of keep going down the line. And that's where lineage comes in. Lineage tells us what has gone into this river that we're drinking from. It's a map of the river that we're drinking from, basically, and showing where water has entered the stream, where that water has come from, who poured that water into this stream, and when, and who authorized it. And in an authentic lineage of Buddhism, you can trace the lineage all the way from your teacher all the way back to the time of the Buddha. And that's how you know that the water that you drink is pure. that it goes all the way back to the time of the Buddha, that you can trace that stream all the way back, and you can know exactly how it got from here to there. And if you can't, if someone said, well, I just found this water bottle in the woods, you should drink it, it's amazing, it's the path to happiness. You go, someone could have pissed in that and thrown it out of an 18-wheeler. You don't know where that came from. You don't just pick up things in the woods and drink them. You have to know where your water comes from. You have to know if what you're drinking is pure water and if it's safe or if it's contaminated. And you have to know whether your spiritual teachings are real and if they come from an authentic lineage going all the way back to the time of the Buddha, or if someone just made them up. When you make a connection with a teacher, it's important to examine them thoroughly. Sometimes people will lie about their credentials. So it's important to examine the teacher thoroughly to ensure that they're legit. Just like how if you apply for a job, your HR department is not going to take you on your word that you've got a social security number. They're going to run it through E-Verify. And they're not going to take you on your word that you've got a master's degree. They're going to have your college send a transcript. You have to verify things sometimes, especially when the stakes are high, like on your spiritual path. And the Buddha emphasized how important it is not to follow a teacher blindly. We must examine a teacher before accepting them as our guru. However, considering all of the mistaken ideas and cultural baggage that we are carrying around, all these ideas about thunder happening from two clouds bumping into each other to, whatever misinformation we've picked up along the way from whatever crazy aunts or uncles we've listened to on Facebook, or whatever our culture is, if we were raised in a religious household or a non-religious household, or in this country, another country, wherever we were raised, we have cultural baggage and ideas that we have absorbed without questioning. So considering all those mistaken ideas we're carrying around, we have to be careful about the kind of logic and reasoning that we apply as we examine our gurus. We do need to examine our gurus, but we also have to examine how we examine them. For instance, if you analyze a guru based on the Judeo-Christian ideas of morality that you were raised with, for instance, you may not find an authentic guru who fits your definition. Or if you do find one that fits, maybe it's because they're teaching Judeo-Christian ideals instead of authentic Buddhist ideals. So you have to question whether you're looking for the truth or if you're looking for validation of your existing beliefs. We also have to be careful not to judge a book by its cover. For instance, you might see a Lama wearing a gold Rolex watch and think, there's no way this guy's the real deal. How can he have renounced the material world with that gold watch on his wrist? But wearing the watch is different than being attached to the watch. There are also monks who appear simple and humble, but are actually hiding behind a mask of hypocrisy. You might judge the Rolex-wearing monk as being attached to an appearance of wealth, when that may not have been his intention at all. While the simple-looking monk may be far more attached to his appearance of humility. He may be very attached to, to his humble and simple appearance, and very attached to people perceiving him in a particular way. So you can't always tell by the outside whether someone's the real deal or not. And especially if you go back and look at, oh my goodness, there are so many teachings and stories of enlightened masters that have not appeared in the way that one might expect. Teachers have appeared as hunters and fishermen and prostitutes and old haggard ladies that without teeth, and just all sorts of ways that teachers have appeared that you wouldn't expect. So ultimately, inner qualities are far more important than the appearance of a teacher. The inner qualities are really what's important. And Dzogchen Jamyang Khyentse says, in the sutras, the same advice about how to follow a guru often known as the Four Reliances, appears again and again. Do not depend on the person, but on the Dharma he teaches. Do not focus on the superficial meaning of his words, but on their full and complete meaning. Do not depend on teachings that require interpretation, but on absolute teachings. And do not depend on the mind, but on wisdom. Jigme Lingpa said that it is extremely important to examine both the Guru and your own motivation for choosing him. Although we must be diligent in examining a teacher before committing to them, until we have significantly progressed on the path, it will be quite difficult for us to tell the difference between a qualified and unqualified teacher. So we need to be aware of our own motivations, because that will help us. Do we just want this person to be true? Do we just want this fact to be true? What's our motivation? Are we really searching for the truth, or are we searching to be comfortable? Or are we seeking to be inspired? Or are we seeking to be flattered? Or so many things. And a lot of times the charlatans will really take advantage of that. And you just really want someone who sees you and who sees that you're special. And then you meet some charlatan and they go, oh, you're so special. You're wonderful. Why has no one seen this before? Just follow me and jump off this cliff and you'll gain enlightenment. And because they give you that feeling of being special, that you know is true, you know you're special, and they actually see it, and so you're going to believe them and go. Well, and so you might blow right past the legit teacher who's like, look, you're not special. There's a million beings out here and they all need your help, and you're not special. That doesn't feel good. It feels good to be special. So you go follow the person that makes you feel special, right? It's important to analyze your motivation. And do you actually have a good motivation and why you're seeking out a spiritual teacher? Because if you don't, that's going to put you at extra risk of following someone who you shouldn't be following. Zongsa Jamyang Kensei says, it is important for spiritual seekers to ask, who can teach the Dharma? What are the qualifications? Can one be a Buddhist teacher without a tradition or lineage? With a certain amount of experience and knowledge, can anyone legitimately start to teach? Should these teachers be taken just as instructors, or should they be taken as gurus? And these are really good questions, because nowadays, you might not have a guru, but you've got some meditation classes being offered at your yoga studio, or in your workplace is picking up mindfulness, or you've got a friend who's into this stuff and teaches you a little bit. What qualifications are required to teach what? I mean, like nowadays, there's the 200-hour long yoga teacher training. And if you go to one of these trainings, you can be a yoga teacher. And although I'm sure this teaches you all of the necessary forms and postures and how to teach them, I would wager that this does not qualify one to teach yoga in its original religious context. Similarly, nowadays there's all sorts of meditation teacher trainings. Are they any good? What knowledge does a teacher graduate with in this course or in that course? Who designed each of these courses? Who determined its authenticity? These are worthwhile questions to ask yourself before signing up for whatever mindfulness meditation class is being offered at your yoga studio or in your workplace. Because again, even just a small shift in that angle, a little shift in that angle can really send you down the wrong road. There's like a metaphor of, if you're shooting an arrow, if you're shooting an arrow like 200 yards, if you're an inch off in your aim, at this point, if your hands are an inch off, that arrow is going to miss your target by a freaking mile. Like, that's going to go way off course. You have to be so specific right up front, and so your motivation has to be good in order to shoot that arrow in the correct direction. And, you have to, in the next moment, your understanding of the teachings you're sharing has to be correct. And the way that you're communicating them to others has to be correct. And if those are not correct, the arrow is going to shoot very far off course. So Zongsa Jamyang Kensei says, if you're only looking for information or practice instructions, you can actually get what you need from anyone who has basic knowledge. Just try to understand that there are limitations. For instance, just because somebody has completed a 3-year retreat and spent 5 years at a Atira, is this person qualified to teach? Yes, probably, if it's just a matter of providing information and instructions for the path practice. But should you take him or her as your guru? That's another matter. So we're going to talk next about what goes into someone you would choose as a guru. But generally speaking, because I know a lot of people just are getting meditation instruction where they can, generally speaking, if you're going to go to some meditation workshop somewhere, make sure that what you're learning is not in conflict with the 4 seals. A seal is something which conveys authenticity. You know, if you think of like some official writing a letter and using that wax seal to seal the envelope, so that you know this authentically, you know, this letter is the authentic writings of this individual who has this wax seal. You know, so a seal is a way of showing authenticity. So the 4 seals are held by every school of Buddhism. This is no matter what school of Buddhism you are studying in, the 4 seals apply. And the 4 seals, if these are present and in teaching, then that would be unauthentic teaching. But if these are not present, or if these are negated by a teaching, then that would not be an authentic teaching in line with the Buddha, in line with what the Buddha taught. So the 4 seals are: all compounded things are impermanent, all emotions are pain, all things have no inherent existence, and nirvana is beyond concepts. And that is a whole subject in and of itself. So I highly recommend that you read Zangsu Jamyang Kensei's book, What Makes You Not a Buddhist, because he explains these very in depth. And having an understanding of those 4 seals will greatly help you in being able to discern when something that you're hearing is, when is it authentic or is it not authentic? You're in some meditation class. Is this actual mindfulness, or is this someone's made up idea of mindfulness? If you understand the 4 seals, if you read that book, What Makes You Not a Buddhist, and you really study up on the 4 seals, that will greatly help you determine what is authentic and what is not. So I highly recommend reading that book. So now, how do you tell if someone is an authentic teacher, authentic enough for you to take them as your guru? Honestly, there's a lot of ambiguity. A lot of ambiguity here. The list of necessary qualities is subjective. There's no definitive checklist. But there's a few criteria that we can generally apply. It's impossible to know if a spiritual guide has all of these qualities because it takes someone enlightened to recognize an enlightened person. But these general criteria have been tested for centuries, so we can assume they won't do much harm. And Zangsu Jamyang Kensei says that because we are living in degenerate times, it's almost impossible to find a guru who has 100% of the qualities described in the ancient tantric texts. But in the Mahayana Sutras, the Buddha offered advice about what to do if we can't find a 100% authentic master. He said that if you encounter a person who, he said basically, if you encounter a person who qualifies, then you should consider accepting him or her as your teacher. And how do you know is that they would talk about the Buddha nature. If you think about how many millions of people there are who talk only about food and clothes and bank balances and never about Buddha nature, you can see why the Buddha would say that a teacher who talks about the Buddha nature should be venerated as the Buddha himself. It is so rare to find anyone who talks about anything other than money, wealth, the news, their own desires. So it might seem like a low bar that if someone talks about Buddha nature, that would qualify them. But when you consider how much that stands out in this world, it's incredibly rare. It's incredibly rare that anyone thinks beyond themselves, and that anyone would talk about the Buddha nature that that is inherent within all living beings and everyone's capacity to attain Buddhahood. So Dzongzar Jamyang Khyentse Rinpoche advises us. He says, in this degenerate time, if you can find a guru with even a few of these qualities, just remember that this person is so rare, they're on the verge of extinction. So these are the good guru qualities, a quick checklist of qualities to look for in a good guru. A good guru has realized the ultimate view, is open-minded, is reluctant to teach. They're not just teaching because they like the sound of their own voice. They're reluctant to teach. They are tolerant. They're learned. They're disciplined. They are kind and never denigrates others. They have a lineage. Very important. They have a lineage. They are progressive. They're humble. They're not interested in your wallet or your thighs or your toes. They're not interested in how much money they can get out of you. They're not interested in, they're not interested in sleeping with you. That's not why they're trying to get you to be a student. They are a living guru and they have a living tradition. A guru should be devoted to the three jewels, trust in the law of karma. They should be generous and bring you to virtuous surroundings. They've tamed the body, speech, and mind. They're gentle and soothing. They have pure perception. They're non-judgmental. They abide by the Buddha's rules of the Vinaya, of the Bodhisattva Vayana, and of course, Vajrayana. So the Bodhisattva Vayana and Vajrayana. A good guru should also fear wrongdoing because they follow the law of karma. And they are forgiving and they are skillful. So this is a general quick checklist that we can use to see whether or not a guru is who they say they are. And for more information on that, I highly recommend that you read Dzongzar Jamyang Khyentse's book, The Guru Drinks Bourbon. And another good book is Not for Happiness. Both of those are excellent books to read to get a sense of how to tell the difference between an authentic and inauthentic teacher. But ultimately, this concept of lineage is so important because you really do, you have to be enlightened to recognize an enlightened person. As sentient beings, we're too deluded to really be able to tell. We can't tell, like I'm sure that the followers of Jim Jones or Rajneesh did think that they had examined their teacher before signing on. But they didn't examine him enough. Maybe no matter how much they examined him, they didn't know enough to be able to examine their teacher well enough. It's difficult for us to see past the facade. If someone really appears like they're a real teacher, or maybe they say that they were recognized by all of these great masters, but you don't even know what proof to look for, or you don't even know how to find out if that's true. So, what do you do? So the lineage is so important here, because the lineage is that history of the river of information that you are getting. Who put water into it at what time? Let's trace that. Is this an authentic teaching? Well, we can trace this teaching back to this teacher, who traces this teacher to this teacher to this teacher to the Buddha. Who recognized this teacher? This teacher recognized her, who was recognized by this person, and by this person, and by this person, by this person, who was recognized by the Buddha. Like, you can go all the way back. Who is legit? Look at the lineage. That's how you can really trust if a guru is with their salt, is what are the other enlightened beings saying? Do other enlightened beings say, yes, this person is legit? Because they can see past that facade. They can see past all the nonsense that we are very easily distracted by. So the quick story to highlight this. when I was a kid, I had a moment of doubt. So my mother is Jetsama Akan Lamo, and she's the first Western woman to be recognized as reincarnate Lama in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And I was a preteen or a tween or whatever they call it, like 12 or something. I had a moment of doubt. It lasted for about an afternoon. But it was an extreme moment of doubt, really, really threw me for a loop. And it was because my mom had given something of mine to someone else, and she didn't realize that this item of mine that she had given away, she didn't realize that it was something that was important to me. She thought it was just a bauble that I had. She didn't realize that it was something that that had been a gift to me that was very meaningful to me. And so when I asked her about this and said, "Where did this thing go?" And she was, she said, "Oh, I gave it to so and so. I thought they would like it," and I was very upset. And she apologized and was like, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know that that was important to you. Like, I'm sure if you go tell the person that was important to you, they'll give it back to you." I didn't want to go do that. I wanted to be mad. So I decided that I didn't. What mattered less, the object itself mattered less to me than my righteousness. My feeling of self-righteousness that this was important to me, and how could she not know that? And I started questioning, how could she be an authentic teacher if she's not, if she doesn't know this, like if she isn't like psychic in this way, if she doesn't have complete omniscience, then maybe this is causing me some doubt. So I sat in my bedroom and I questioned this, and I go, how do I think about this? How do I think if she's not totally omniscient, should I have faith in her? And where I came to fairly quickly was who recognized her, who recognized Jetsama. Jetsama was recognized by His Holiness Pena Rinpoche. His Holiness Pena Rinpoche at the time was the head of the Nyingma lineage. And I have met His Holiness Pena Rinpoche. I have been in his presence. I've received his teachings. And there is no doubt in my mind that His Holiness Pena Rinpoche is a living Buddha. That's it. There's no doubt in my mind that His Holiness Pena Rinpoche is a living Buddha. And so if His Holiness Pena Rinpoche said that Jetsama is the reincarnation of Genyenma Akan Lamo, then that's the truth, because His Holiness Pena Rinpoche is a living Buddha. And I have no doubt of that. If I did doubt that, I would look to see who recognizes Holiness Pena Rinpoche. I would look to see, what do his peers say? What does the Dalai Lama say? What are the heads of the other Tibetan Buddhist schools say? What do all of the, who is the head of the Nyingma lineage before him? What made His Holiness Pena Rinpoche chosen as the head of the Nyingma lineage? How do I know that this was legitimate? You can look back at that lineage, and you can see who recognized who. And you can very easily see that, if I have faith in His Holiness Pena Rinpoche, which I do, then I must have faith in Jetsama Akan Lamo, because His Holiness Pena Rinpoche, I know, would only say and do things that are for the benefit of all sentient beings, and I know that because he is the epitome of loving kindness and compassion. He's like the sun of just radiating love and compassion. And so I have no doubt in my mind then. That solves the case for me. So lineage is a very important tool for determining the authenticity of a teacher. And I'll just end with this last quote. Dzongso Jamyang Khyentse says that Gendun Chapel replied to the question, "How do we know the Buddha is great?" by saying, "Because Nagarjuna said so." And why do we buy into Nagarjuna? Because Chandrakirti said so. And how do we know Chandrakirti is correct? How do we know Chandrakirti is right? Because my teacher said so. And how do you prove your teacher is right? This part is up to you. You must make up your own mind. So that's all I have for today. It was a long class. Thank you for sticking with me till the end. I hope that you will think critically about your spiritual path, about the ideas that you accept as true, And I hope you'll think critically about your own habits and ideas that that cause you to blindly follow others, or that cause you to blindly accept other truths. I hope that this will make you just reevaluate some of the things that you've learned or heard over the years, and to just think things through. Don't be a stupid animal that just runs around and is bossed around by your emotions or your habits, or just seeking what's comfortable. Look for the truth. Look for the real truth. And the real truth is rarely comfortable. But the real truth will open our hearts and will help us to be more compassionate to others. It will increase our wisdom. It will increase our compassion. And that's actually the last thought I want to leave you with is another way that you can tell if a lineage is true, if a teacher is a good teacher, is to see how their students do. Do their students become more compassionate listening to the teachings of this teacher? Just like how if you're going to drink some water, and you notice everyone else drinking from this water falls down dead, you're not going to drink that water, right? So look to see whether the students of a teacher, are they learning how to be more compassionate? That is a very important qualification. And then also one more thought is that just like how I may find, I may be able to drink the water here in my own country just fine. If I go to Mexico, Mexicans can drink the water there just fine. They're adapted to it. But if I drink water in Mexico, I would get quite sick because my body is not adapted to the bacteria in the water in Mexico, right? So maybe I can eat some grilled tilapia, but I'm not going to eat raw lettuce because I'll get sick because I'm not used to that water. So metaphorically speaking, that's similar to ensuring that the teachings that you are listening to are coming from your path. Is this coming from your lineage? At this temple, we are following the Nyingma lineage, and within that, the Payul tradition. So that is the stream of water that we're drinking from. Although there are other streams of water, there are all of these other schools of Buddhism out there, and they are all legitimate, wonderful paths. They're not necessarily for you. Just because a teaching is good for someone else doesn't mean that it's the right teaching for you. And again, that's why it's so important to have a guru who can tell you what you need. Just like how if you were sick, would you choose between having a library of medical reference books, or would you choose to have a doctor? And if you're really sick, you want a doctor, because the doctor is going to be able to synthesize that knowledge and tell you what applies for your situation right now. And that's going to save you a lot of suffering. So think critically, love deeply, find an authentic teacher, pay attention to lineage. Yeah, that's it for today. So let's end with the dedication. This is on the last page of the opening and closing prayers. By this effort, may all sentient beings be free from suffering. May their minds be filled with the nectar of virtue. In this way, may all causes resulting in suffering be extinguished and only the light of compassion shine throughout all realms.